Chapters 5 and 6 of Les Misérables, Volume 4, by Victor Hugo. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Martina Hutchins in Berkeley, California. Les Misérables, Volume 4, by Victor Hugo. Translated by Isabel Florence Hapgood. Book 12, Corinth. Chapter 5, Preparations. The journals of the day, which said that nearly impregnable structure of the barricade of the Rue de la Chanvrerie, as they call it, reached to the level of the first floor, were mistaken. The fact is that it did not exceed an average height of 6 or 7 feet. It was built in such a manner that the combatants could, at their will, either disappear behind it or dominate the barrier and even scale its crest by means of a quadruple row of paving stones placed on top of each other and arranged as steps in the interior. On the outside, the front of the barricade, composed of piles of paving stones and casks bound together by beams and planks, which were entangled in the wheels of Anco's dray and of the overturned omnibus, had a bristling and inextricable aspect. An aperture large enough to allow a man to pass through had been made between the wall of the house and the extremity of the barricade, which was furthest from the wine shop, so that an exit was possible at this point. The pole of the omnibus was placed upright and held up with ropes, and a red flag, fastened to this pole, floated over the barricade. The little Mondétour barricade, hidden behind the wine-shop building, was not visible. The two barricades united formed a veritable redoubt, and Enjolras and Courfeyrac had not thought fit to barricade the other fragment of the Rue Mondétour, which opens through the Rue des Prêcheurs and issue into the Halles, wishing, no doubt, to preserve a possible communication with the outside, and not entertaining much fear of an attack through the dangerous and difficult street of the Rue des Prêcheurs. With the exception of this issue, which was left free, and which constituted what Follade, in his strategical style, would have termed a branch, and taking into account also the narrow cutting arranged on the Rue de la Chanvrerie, the interior of the barricade, where the wine-shop formed a salient angle, presented an irregular shape, closed on all sides. There existed an interval of 20 paces between the grand barrier and the lofty houses which formed the background of the street, so that one might say that the barricade rested on these houses, all inhabited, but closed from top to bottom. All this work was performed without any hindrance, in less than an hour, and without this handful of bold men seeing a single bearskin cap or a single bayonet make their appearance. The very bourgeois who still ventured at this hour of riot to enter the Rue Saint-Denis cast a glance at the Rue de la Chanvrerie, caught sight of the barricade, and redoubled their pace. The two barricades being finished, and the flag run up, a table was dragged out of the wine-shop, and Courfeyrac mounted on the table. Enjolras brought the square coffer, and Courfeyrac opened it. This coffer was filled with cartridges. When the mob saw the cartridges, a tremor ran through the bravest, and a momentary silence ensued. Courfeyrac distributed them with a smile. Each one received 30 cartridges. Many had powder, and set about making others with the bullets which they had run. As for the barrel of powder, it stood on the table on one side, near the door, and was held in reserve. The alarm beat which ran through all Paris did not cease, but it had finally come to be nothing more than a monotonous noise to which they no longer paid any attention. This noise retreated at times, and again drew near with melancholy undulations. They loaded the guns and carbines all together without haste, with solemn gravity. Enjolras went and stationed 3 sentinels outside the barricades, on the Rue de la Chanvrerie, the second in the Rue des Prêcheurs, the third at the corner of the Rue de la Petite Truanderie. Then the barricades having been built, the posts assigned, the guns loaded, the sentinels stationed, they waited, alone in those redoubtable streets, through which no one passed any longer, surrounded by those dumb houses which seemed dead, and in which no human movement palpitated, enveloped in the deepening shades of twilight, which was drawing on, in the midst of that silence through which something could be felt advancing, and which had about it something tragic and terrifying, isolated, armed, determined, and tranquil. Chapter 6. Waiting. During those hours of waiting, what did they do? We must needs tell, since this is a matter of history. While the men made bullets and the women lint, while a large saucepan of melted brass and lead, destined to the bullet mold, smoked over a glowing brazier, while the sentinels watched, weapon in hand, on the barricade, while Enjolras, whom it was impossible to divert, kept an eye on the sentinels, Combeferre, Courfeyrac, Jean Prouvaire, Feuilly, Bossuet, Joly, Bahorel, and some others, sought each other out and united as in the most peaceful days of their conversations in their student life, and in one corner of this wine shop, which had been converted into a casement, a couple of paces distant from the redoubt which they had built, with their carbines loaded and primed, resting against the backs of their chairs, these fine young fellows, so close to a supreme hour, began to recite love verses. What verses? These. Vous rappelez-vous notre douce vie, lorsque nous étions si jeunes tous deux, et que nous n'avions à cœur d'autre envie que d'être bien mis et d'être amoureux. Lorsque, en ajoutant votre âge à mon âge, nous ne comptons pas à 40 ans, et que dans notre humble et petit ménage, toute même l'hiver nous attend printemps. Beau jour, Manuel était fier et sage. Paris s'assied à de saints banquets. Faut lancer la fondre et votre corsage avait une épingle où j'ai même piqué. Tu vous contemplez, avocat sans causer, quand je vous menais après dîner. Vous étiez jolie au point que le rosé me faisions la fait de se retourner. Je l'ai entendu dire, et elle belle, comme elles sont bonnes, quels cheveux à fleurs. Sous son mantelet, elle cache une aile, son bonnet charmant et à peine éclos. J'irai avec tu, pressant ton bras souple, les passants croyant que l'amour charmait. Ave Marie, dans notre heureux couple, les du mois d'avril à bon mois de mai. Nous vivions cachés, comptant porte-close, dévorant l'amour bon fruit défendu. Ma bouche n'avait pas dit une chose, que déjà tout cœur avait répondu. Le second était le doigt bucolique. Oh, j'ai t'adoré du soir à matin. C'est ainsi qu'une amie amoureuse appliquée la carte du tendre épée latin. Ô place mon belle, ô place d'enfant, quand dans le temps frais et printanier, tu tirais ton bras sur ta jambe fine, je voyais une astray au fond du grenier. J'ai foutu le planton, mais rien ne me reste, mieux que mes branches et que la monnaie. Tu m'as démontré la bonne céleste, avec une fleur que tu m'as donnée. Je t'obéissais, tu m'étais soumise. Au grenier doré, tes lacets, tes voix allaient en